I'm here today with Abby McKay, who is an amazing assistant principal, and we're going to talk a bit about her career and a bit about why she does what she does. So, Abby, can you tell us about your career path to date? How have you got to where you are?
Yeah, so I'm 33 now, so I'm 20. I started at 21, so quite a long time now. And I actually never thought I'd go into teaching. Had no interest in it whatsoever. Actually, I was quite set against it because everyone thinks we do an English degree. The only thing you can do is become a teacher, and I was like, I'm not going to be one of those people. And I ended up in industry for a little bit. I think all of like 6 months and working in the city, and I hated it. And I
What did
just
you
quit
hate
one day.
about it?
Do you know, I hated the hustle and bustle of it. I hated that your only kind of escape was the coffee corner. I hated being around like adults, like real grown-ups. I felt like I wasn't a real grown-up. I was 21, just finished uni, and all these like real grown-ups were there. I just didn't, it wasn't fun. And I quit one day and I was like, that's it, I'm just gonna quit. And then I saw like a TA job at a secondary school in Hackney. And I said, oh, let's just that will be all right for a couple of months while I figure out what I'm going to do. And went into schools and loved it. And then did teach first and kind of snowballed from there. So, I'm currently on my third school. I started thinking I want to do this because I love English and I want other kids to love it. And then slowly you realize that, you can only really reach a certain number of children with that philosophy. So then I thought, well, if I can impact other teachers and how they teach and how they interact with children, then I can ensure that lots of children get a really good experience of school. And that's when I started going into leadership, looking at whole school behaviour mostly. I did some curriculum stuff, but it wasn't really my bag. Too many adults in curriculum. I wanted to
That's
do more
really
with the
interesting.
kids.
Say more about that, because you loved English, that's why you went into it, but you didn't
Mhm.
end up going down the curriculum route. You were never a head of department.
Oh no.
No.
I think I loved my subject, and I remember growing up and lots of my friends didn't like English.
Mm.
And I decided you just weren't taught it right. I had a teacher called Miss Foster, who is definitely one of the reasons why I'm still in teaching. And actually, my niece goes to my old secondary school, and Miss Foster's the VP there. So it's actually like this really weird like situation. And I remember thinking, if you had the right teacher, you'd love this subject.
Mm.
And then I thought, if kids have the right teachers, generally they'll love school. And that's why I chose that route rather than the curriculum route, because I don't really care now if kids jump off the table because they love my subject. I want them to find something to jump off tables for. I don't care what it is,
Mm.
but see the passion in someone else and be like, oh, Miss McKay is mental. Like, why does she love it so much? I want to find something that I love like this, which is kind of why I ended up going the kid route, the pastoral route, more than the curriculum route.
Amazing. So tell me about what's the role you're doing now? What's the school you're working in now? Tell me about its context.
Yeah, so I'm currently the head of behaviour at Harris Academy Greenwich in Eltham. It is a really interesting place to work. It was in special measures many, many, many moons ago, over a decade ago, and then Harris Federation took it over, and it is now an outstanding school. And it's been outstanding for a while now, even under the new framework. So we've got outstanding last year again, which is like
Amazing.
tricky. Yeah, amazing. It kind of shows how what we do here to get our standards under the new framework. Um,
Mm.
and we've got a real mix of complex kids here. Definitely a disproportionate amount of people premium children. Um, More boys than girls because we've got quite a few girls' schools around.
Mm.
And it's actually in the middle of an estate. But because we're outstanding, you get lots of children with EHCP. So we've got more EHCP children than most other schools. We've got more people premium kids, as I said before. So it's a really complex place to work, but really fun.
Great. And
Really fun.
so tell me, the thing that I think really resonated with people when you spoke to our MPQ cohort was the way you talk about behavior and what you believe.
Hmm.
And you've kind of touched on that already with like why you've gone into this role, but can you like
Hmm.
share your philosophy of behavior?
Yeah, I think so. My big thing around behavior is that it has to be taught. We have to teach children the social and the academic behaviors for success, right? Like, we cannot assume that they come with these things equipped in their home life or in their values or in their DNA. You know, if we want to create decent human beings, we have to teach them what that looks like. And that extends past our textbooks and our curriculums and whatever else, right? It's in the fabric of being. And the kids will say to me, like, Miss, why'd you do this job? You could work anywhere. And I say, well, you're going to be the adults in the world of my children. And if you're not decent human beings, right, I'm screwing myself over, ultimately. And I think we have to therefore model to children what those behaviors look like. You know, children these days are like mini lawyers. They know their rights in a way that we never did before. They are curious, sometimes to a fault, but they are going to question things and push boundaries. And, you know, when we were children, it was mostly, you know, parents and teachers said how high and you just jump, right? And these guys are saying, why am I jumping for you? You know, why should I jump? And we have to, rather than trying to force them into an era that they're not a part of, we have to make them more aware and allow them to unpick things themselves. So, you know, I don't really.
So, like, that's really interesting. And I bet that not everyone in your school agrees with that, right? I think there are people out there who think that the teacher's the authority. So how do you get everyone on board with that kind of respectful philosophy of, like, actually you need to explain to children, like, why, and you need to build that relationship? What do you do to get people to buy into that?
I think the big thing for teachers is, you know, you either go into it for two reasons. I think teaching, like, you enjoy your subject and you want to teach it, or you enjoy working with young people. But the first thing I say to staff is, like, the first pillar of a successful classroom is good behavior leadership. It's not about management. I think people think about managing, and that for me is, you know, trying to do your best and work through something. That's how you manage, right? But to lead is to model. And ultimately, if you are leading, that's how you win with children. You know, it's got to be the death of the ego for the teacher, and you are a role model for young people. So actually, if you don't like being shouted at, or kids making sarcastic comments towards you, then you can't do that to them. You know, and, you know, high rapport, high challenge. You know, our curriculum is very challenging for young people. Society is very challenging for young people. They need to be walked through all of that by someone that they trust. You have to build rapport with them. And it's not, you know, if you ask my kids, I'm not the friendliest teacher. They're very aware of that. They know that Miss McKay's so blunt, Miss McKay this, Miss McKay that, but they know where I stand on things. I'm really honest with them. I'm like, look, this is going to go one of two ways, really. Okay, let's just talk about what's going to happen. Yeah, you're going to say I'm not doing this, and I'll say this is the school rules and we've got a policy in place, and you'll argue with me about that for 5 minutes, and I'll say to you, right, I'm not arguing about it anymore. You've got option A or you've got option B. I'm going to walk away now. I'm not being rude, but I'm going to give you time to think about it. And in 5 minutes' time, you let me know what you want to do. Right? Because ultimately, you're giving them that controlled choice. You're telling them, you're talking to them like an adult. Like, I don't shout at children. And that way you build that rapport. You know, rapport is not about friendliness. It's about consistency. It's about trust. And it's about them knowing where they stand. And they may not like it, but as I said, it's not about being their friend. So once you build that rapport, then they trust you to lead them in various other ways.
And what about, because just hearing about your school context, and thinking about the, you know, the state of the profession generally, I bet there are some teachers in your school who are trainees, who are new to the profession, who, like, really want to have that high rapport, high challenge. But it's really challenging when you're kind of got 32 faces looking at you at the start of your career. How do you support your colleagues to have those? Like, what do you do to make sure that they can also have that same kind of dynamic with children, or develop that in their practice?
Yeah, so we talk a lot about, you know, the being and the doing, right? Like, the theory around these are the things that you need to do to build rapport, and this is how you need to be in your interaction with children, right? So, and we're quite prescriptive. I think it can be really hard. You know, my early feedback in my NQT times, when it was called NQT, it was like, you know, Abby, your trouble was going to be trying to teach other people to do what you do naturally. And that, I think, is a big thing. You know, often when you end up being a head of behavior or something like that, it's because you've got a natural affinity to young people. But that's only a little bit of the job, man. Like, you've now got to train 100 and odd other people to do what you do. And what I found out was that if you use really clear kind of success criteria, that's how you do it. So I will say to teachers, here are some things that you can do outside of the classroom to build rapport, right? So when you see a kid in the corridor, use their name, morning, Charlie, things like that, right? So one, they're like, oh, she cared enough to know my name. Two, they know who I am. So if something happens, they know who they're looking for. It's things like going to the shows, right? Like, if you've got a kid who's doing a show after school, you haven't got to be there the whole time, but go so you can say, oh, do you know what? I didn't know you were an amazing dancer. Like, you put pennies in the jar, right? It's at a football match that the kids are playing after school. Go and have a quick look out the window, or, oh, I saw you scored 2 goals yesterday. How'd you see that? Oh, I was looking from my window. Amazing. Those are things you can do outside of the classroom.
You just used the phrase "put pennies in the jar." Can you just expand on what you mean by that?
Yeah, so it's always like pennies in the jar. So I think, high rapport, high challenge. It's really hard to challenge children if you're working from a place of like debt, basically. So if all of your interactions with a child has been negative, you've got nothing to draw upon when you're trying to challenge them. So you want to try and catch them getting it right where you can. And that might not be in your classroom, because some of the trickiest kids you're dealing with may be in your classroom. So the part of the doing of that is, right, you need to go and see that child in another class where they get it right. You need to go and see that child somewhere where they feel successful. Go and watch them in a room or in a club where they feel success, and then raise that with them. And that's you depositing positives into the jar. So that when you've got to pull out a penny because they've gotten it wrong, you say, I've seen you do X, Y, and Z really, really well. But it's just gone a little bit wrong today. Let's talk about how we get that right.
I love that. Thank you so much. That's great. Yeah. So sorry, I interrupted you. You were talking so beautifully about how you train your colleagues, how you get them to do the being and doing. Is there anything else you want to say about how you train others?
The big thing about the being and doing, I think, is definitely having that checklist of these are the kind of things that you can do that work really well. So, like, some children do not like to be called out publicly. It's all that stuff around getting down to their level, having that quiet word, having a quick chat with them outside, having your classroom door open, the kids outside, but you're still looking in. All of those little kind of things that you see on in the videos or Doug Lemov, all of those kind of strategies work really well. And then when it comes to the being, I think having stock phrases. So, if you ask my kids, they'll say there's certain thing that Miss McKay always says. And I think having those phrases helps you to regulate your emotions, because it can be quite hard to keep your cool, right? Like, a kid's really grinding your gears. How do you keep your cool? You become like a bit of a robot. You say certain things, right? So some of my common ones are, because I care about you, this isn't optional. Right? Like, this is really simple. Or, I get that you felt this way, and yet it caused this. Or, can you tell me one thing that didn't go right? I know that this happened, that was so-and-so's fault, but can you admit to me one thing that you didn't do right? So those kind of, like, having stock phrases, I give that to staff all the time, just things that they can say, saying thank you rather than please. Tuck your shirt in, thank you. Right? I'm assuming compliance. Rather than, hey, come here, the shirt, that you need to have things you can say quickly. Kids have got short attention spans. Let's be honest. So, it's how you do things, right? Like, and I think it then allowed me to challenge staff. So, staff will say, well, that kid was really defiant. And I said, right, well, talk to me about how that happened. Well, I was telling them to tuck their shirt in and they walked away. I said, well, when you told them to tuck their shirt in, were you looking at them? You use their name. Because if not, they're mini lawyers, right? They will claim, I didn't know Mr. talking to me. And they wouldn't necessarily be wrong. Hey, tuck your shirt in. Who are you talking to? Do you know what I mean? So it's like, Joe, morning, Joe. Come here for a sec. Tuck your shirt in, thank you. That's good. Thank you, mate. See you later. Or it's, Joe, I saw you. Did I see you yesterday? Was it yesterday I saw you in that club? Oh, that was amazing. Oh, before you pop off, tell me about those school shoes.
Just worried about my shirt now.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I love
and
that.
it's the tone, like, that's the being, right? It's the Because sometimes kids will be like, oh, miss, I know what you're going to say. I'm like, you haven't got a clue what I'm going to say. You haven't got a clue what I'm going to say. But yes, you're right. Your tie isn't quite the way I want it to be. You are right. But, don't assume.
I used to walk up to a group of kids and they'd start taking their earrings
Yeah.
out, and you're like, yeah, you see me coming. You know exactly what I'm going to do.
It's exactly that. And
look, can I ask you about, because obviously your role is a really interesting one, because you're working with, presumably you work with some heads of year. So I'd be interested to hear how you, because they know their year group so well. So what's your role in supporting heads of year to lead their year groups brilliantly?
yeah, so we have pastoral managers. So they are ultimately heads of year, but they are non-teaching heads of year. And they do know their year groups really well. And that's the strength of it, right? Like ultimately, what you need when you're managing pastoral managers or heads of year is you need the kind of systematic overview and you to trust that they know the children as individuals. And the other thing I often find with heads of year is that they don't get a chance to actually speak enough about what they know about kids and to impart that knowledge onto other staff members above them or in your general population of teachers. So we have line management every 2 weeks. We have team meetings once a week, and we debrief about behaviour every night.
Really?
Yeah. And people say that's a lot, but but we call it a download. So it literally is between 3:50 and 4:15. Come and see me and tell me what's been going on today for your year group. Yeah, it's a download. So because it happens every day, it's like, we get to hear what's been going on, bright spots or not, suspensions and things like that. But we get to make sure that we deal with things in that moment, because the longer you allow things to go wrong, the more you erode the culture. Yeah. So I think, the best way to work with heads of year and pastoral managers is to make sure their voices are heard, give them opportunities to have those individual voices, but also to feed into your bigger systems frequently. And I definitely think that heads of years and pastoral managers should talk to whole staff more. Okay. In briefings and team around a child meetings. Actually, do you know what? Let's sit down and talk about this kid, because you've got the most knowledge. I've got a couple of kids who I'm looking at the date. I'm like, you keep on getting on called. What's going on? Like Stanley, like what's going on here, sort of thing. And I'm like, talk to me about the teachers that you get on with the best. Yeah. Why do you think that is? And then I'll email them. I'm like, hey, like Stanley's highlighted you guys as the teachers that he actually interacts with the most in class. Can you just give me a couple of pointers about what goes really well there? I want to send that out to all his teachers. Yeah, and you email that out, and then they feed back, and teachers will, and I'm like, please send us any bright spots or reply, or if you've got any other new strategies. And all of that knowledge it gets held in classrooms if we're not careful. So
that's such a great way of sharing it out more widely and making things better for the child.
Exactly.
What about your more senior colleagues? So how do you work with the rest of SLT? How do you work with the head teacher to make sure behaviour stays on their radar, stays improving all the time, doesn't dip? Yeah,
so it's so tricky. I think as behaviour is always so personal. I think it's one of the things that teachers find the most personal. Like if you're told that actually, you're not very good at behaviour management, it hurts more than you being told you're not very, your subject knowledge isn't as good as it could be, because it feels more personal. And the thing to note is that doesn't change when you get to senior leadership. So, it can still feel very personal, even if it's someone who is, on the same level of you or above you. But if you're really clear on what your vision is and what your values are, then you use that. I'm like, look, in service of us teaching young people how to manage their emotions, right? Can I give you some challenging feedback? Do you know what I mean?
The way you phrased that was so brilliant. In service of, like, this is what we're here to do.
In service of this, man, like in service of the fact that we want to teach young people how to behave, socially in their interaction with adults. Like, can I give you some challenging feedback? And I like that you're asking, because they're going to say yes, but you're priming them to want to have I want the feedback, I'm hearing the feedback. That's such a great turn of phrase. And that's why maybe it's the English teacher in me. I think phrasing is so important. It's like how you say things makes all the world of difference. But you can only challenge people if you have made it really clear what your intentions are, what the goals are, what the visions are, what your values are. So like our 3 key values for our children are work hard, be kind, take responsibility. And we say that our teachers are our value ambassadors. Like, you guys have to be the ones that model working hard, being kind, and being responsible. So, if you've had a sarcastic interaction with a child that's then made them blow up, I'm like, look, in service of us teaching young people how to be kind, can I offer you a little bit of feedback on that interaction you had yesterday? It's that. Do you know what I mean? And you have to be willing to do that up and down, your organization. You have to highlight that. You've got to say it early on, guys, you know what? Working with young people is really, really challenging. And we don't always all get it right. Like, can we contract that we're going to challenge each other when we see poor interactions and spotlight when we see good ones?
That's so great. That's so great. And I know you've got a really, really important job that you're taking time away to talk to me today. So given that we only have a couple more minutes, is there anything else that we've not touched on that you're like, I really want to make sure I say this?
I think the big thing is, I'm assuming that if you're taking part in some of these courses, you are keen to, make big changes to the culture in your school. And, do not assume that personality is enough to do that. You have to make sure that you are making systematic changes in how you are approaching culture. And that's the way to get everyone on board. You cannot assume that people will be the same as you. Don't assume that everyone likes children. Don't assume that everyone, enjoys that side of the job. Like, you just can't, right? So you have to therefore work out systems that mean that all young people get a great deal every day. And that will increase staff satisfaction. You feel like you've done a way better job if the outcomes for your young people are up there. And those outcomes are not just academic, but they have to be social as well. When you see a kid turn themselves around, do you know what I mean? The kid used to stop all the time or walk out of places or never use their voice, never said please, didn't know how to say goodbye, never gave eye contact. Like, when you see that child turn that around, you go home feeling like it's been a better day. So I think that's really important.
Honestly, when you speak about anything, I get goosebumps.
Oh, stop it.
No, you're amazing. I'm going to stop recording now because I don't want to go over time because you've got so much to do.